So we're sort of looking forward to, or at least I am more so than I was looking forward to the conventions, to the debates between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, which are scheduled starting in the later part of September, I believe. We're going to be covering all of them live for sure. One of the things that I've said is that if you are expecting that Joe Biden is going to implode and he's going to just be unable to get anything out and so on and so forth, you're probably going to be underwhelmed. And in fact, one of the things that I've been pointing to were some of the expectations when the Democratic primary was down to only Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. You had a bunch of people on the right and even some people on the left, kind of in the pro-Bernie crowd, who were saying Biden, something's wrong with Biden. Biden's going to be unable to keep it together. Biden's going to be unable to put together a coherent sentence. And of course, Joe Biden did fine in the debate against Bernie Sanders. Now, it is true that the subject matter, because it was heavily coronavirus based, probably helped Biden in some sense. But if you were expecting Biden to be unable to put together a sentence, you certainly were disappointed. And I've made the same prediction about the debates with Donald Trump. You have people, including like Don Jr. and others on the right, who are pushing the Biden dementia narrative, who are claiming that Joe Biden is barely going to know where he is in a debate with Donald Trump. And I just don't think that's going to be the case. Now, in advance of this, Donald Trump has now started floating the idea that maybe the reason Joe Biden was able to hold it together in his one-on-one debate with Bernie Sanders was that Joe Biden was on some kind of drug, presumably some kind of stimulant. Now, what is amazing to me about this is that this is exactly the speculation about Donald Trump. The degree of projection from Donald Trump and Republicans, if you look at the RNC this week, accusing the Democratic Party and the DNC of everything which they have been doing this week, accusing the DNC of merely criticizing Trump during their convention. Well, all they've been doing is criticizing Joe Biden, accusing the DNC of not talking about policy during their convention. The Republicans have not talked about any policy during their convention. And now, after years of speculation that Donald Trump, we've identified upper Trump and downer Trump. Upper Trump sometimes shows up at events, sweaty, speaking in a sort of manic way, dilated pupils, even in front of bright lighting, sniffing, glitching, etc. And then sometimes it's a downer Trump that shows up. And, the sort of casual speculation is it amphetamines when it's upper Trump? Is it benzos when it's downer Trump? Is it some combination of both? Okay, whatever. Now Trump says he wants drug tests before the debates because he believes Joe Biden may have been on something during his debate with Bernie Sanders. Here's the video.
What nobody thought is that he was even going to win because he had debate performances were so bad. Frankly, his best performance was against Bernie. We're going to call for a drug test, by the way, because his best performance was against Bernie. It wasn't that he was Winston Churchill, because he wasn't, but it was a normal, boring debate. Nothing amazing happened. And we are going to call for a drug test, because there's no way you can't do that.
What do you think's going on?
Well, I don't know how he could have been so incompetent in his debate performances and then all of a sudden be okay against Bernie. I don't mean he was good or great. I just mean he was a normal, boring debate. There was nothing, you understand. He got through it. Well, frankly, I thought he was, they were even, more or less, right? And most people didn't think. And so they did something. There was no way. Because I watched his debates against Kamala, who's another one that's a beauty. She's, if you go by the polls, she started high and she ended low. That's usually not a good sign, right, as far as somebody that you pick. But against Elizabeth Warren, they ripped her apart.
So there's a few different thoughts here. First of all, on the facts, should candidates be drug tested before debates? I don't really think so, to be perfectly frank. Now, I think if you want to step back and say, we need to look at more requirements to be president of the United States, I think it's legally difficult. The one that for me would be a higher priority than a drug test would be an actual proper cognitive test and a neuropsych eval like Dr. Bandy Lee talked to us about a couple of weeks ago. But maybe the country would decide presidents shouldn't be using drugs, and thus presidential candidates should be tested for drugs. The idea of a drug test before a debate is not particularly interesting to me, but the most interesting part of it is that it is Trump who many have suspected of abusing, whether it's amphetamines or some other type of upper. And again, it's all speculative, but the idea that now Trump is saying Biden should be tested, what I hear is projection. The constant projection from Donald Trump of the last 4 years has trained me to think if Trump is pointing to something, if Trump is raising the idea, if it occurs to Trump that Biden's performance may have been enhanced by some kind of stimulant or something else, it seems implicit that Trump is talking about stimulants. I immediately go to, is Trump thinking about that because it applies to him? And I'm curious to hear what you think about this. One of our sponsors today is Surfshark, a premium VPN service packed with a ton of useful features, giving my audience 85% off a 2-year plan. This is under $2 a month. Plus, you'll get 3 extra months for free. It's 2020. If you're not using a VPN, you should really start. Online, government surveillance is a problem. Internet providers can sell your internet history. Big tech companies track what you do online. You can protect yourself against all of this just by using a VPN. And the one I use is Surfshark because it comes with all kinds of special features. It's a company you can trust with your online privacy. Surfshark hides your IP address, removes ads, protects you from malware and phishing attempts, and it allows you to stream content that's only available in other countries. You can install Surfshark on unlimited devices, and Surfshark never monitors or logs your internet activity. Surfshark is giving my audience 85% off a 2-year plan, which comes out to less than $2 a month. Plus, you'll get 3 extra months for free. Go to surfshark.deals/Pakman. The link is right underneath this video.